Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is Cyrus coming at you with a new video tonight, and there has been a lot of buzz around this article from the bastion of credible journalism known as express.co.uk with their headline, There is no life after death. Scientist insists afterlife is impossible. So I've been seeing this article get spread in a lot of the groups and causing a little bit of unnecessary anxiety. What you have to understand, and this is going to be a kind of my preliminary speech before I read this article for the first time and basically debunk it. Although I don't want to say debunk it because, I have to be objective, so I don't know what the article says, and so I don't want to come in with the preconceived or prejudice that I'm going to just dismiss it before I know what's in the article. But I'm willing to place a very high margin of guesswork that whatever is in this article is really ridiculous for somebody like me who is engaged in the objective evidence of an afterlife. That it's going to be basically a very ridiculous piece. So as a precursor, I want to talk about how it's possible to get manipulated by the media. Express.co.uk I've referenced before on this channel because they frequently post things in support of supernatural ideas, including an afterlife. So they've had quite a few articles. Physician believes there is an afterlife, or they may prop up a near-death experience. Man recovers from cardiac arrest and proves there's an afterlife because he identifies something, or a team of scientists now think there is an afterlife. So I've seen these articles on express.co.uk. So they'll put those articles up, and then they will periodically put up an article like this one, which will then, using just as much sensationalistic overtones, propose the opposite idea. So what are they doing? They're doing this like cure versus disease manipulation model, where they get people excited and then they get their hopes down, they give them anxiety, and then they give them a new article to bring back their to bring back their feeling of elation, and then they create the anxiety again. So they're manipulating your feelings and emotions to keep you clicking and to keep you on their website or whatever media platforms that they're using. This is kind of media 101, and we've been seeing this more than ever during the great crises of 2020, which now there has been two: the global civil unrest as well as the virus. And the media has been using all of their abilities to capitalize on those situations. And so this is just a small example of how they manipulate people's emotions, thoughts, and feelings. So it doesn't matter who the scientist is. There's countless materialist academics out there who, with their heads stuck in the sand about these subjects. That's no surprise. That's not news. But express.co.uk will manipulate these subjects because, let's face it, a lot of people want an afterlife to be real. Fewer kind of like cynical teenagers want an afterlife. The people, when you're young or you're depressed or cynical, it's not so interesting. But when you get older, you have loved ones, you lose loved ones, you start to really hope for an afterlife to be real. Right, and that's why I think most people interested in this subject, people who listen to my lectures, who listen to the evidence I present in this channel, a lot of y'all are skewing older, 50 and up. So a lot of people are really banking on this because, you lose a husband, you lose a wife, you lose a child. It happens to actually all of us at some point or another. Then, what you have left to look forward to in this thing called existence, right, is an afterlife. So we know that there was that demand. You have people who want there to be an afterlife. So you get people's hopes up, and then you pull it away, and you get the hopes up, then you pull it away. Now, this is not the same as presenting two sides of an argument, because you can just tell by the headline that they're using kind of clickbait techniques and they're sensationalizing it. So all it is media manipulation. In life, one of the most important skills that you can learn is to not get manipulated. Don't get manipulated by the media. Don't get manipulated by the powers that be, and don't let other forces direct or dictate what your thoughts are. You have to think independently from whatever the the powers that be, the PTB, whatever the PTB wants you to think. You have to think outside of that, and you have to be a sovereign agent. You have to be independent, and don't let these things coerce you into where they want you to go. And sometimes that's as simple as being on a website, clicking on advertisements and making them money. Okay, that being said, let's go ahead and go into this article now, and hopefully it's not going to take too much time because I don't like wasting my time with this kind of garbage. Before we go further, if you think that Afterlife research is valuable, please go down and hit that subscribe button or share this video and let other people know about this ridiculous article and what my opinion as an Afterlife researcher is about it. Also, if you're interested in supporting this work, you can become a patron at patreon.com/Afterlife Topics, or just donate at the PayPal link in the channel or the video description down below. Okay, so let's take a look. Title: There is no life after death. Scientist insists afterlife is impossible. Okay, so let's read the subheadline. There is no life after death, according to one well-respected physicist who claims humanity has to abandon all fanciful beliefs and focus on what the laws of the universe dictate. Right away, this is getting really stupid. We don't know what the laws of the universe are. Okay, so there's laws of the universe that are completely undiscovered. We barely know what dark matter is, and that makes up most of the universe. It seems to be a parallel or alternate dimension. So that's mainstream physics. Stephen Hawking was claiming, not too long before he passed away, talking in matter-of-fact terms about beings from other dimensions interacting with us, commonly seen as shadow people when you go out of your body or in a sleep paralysis state. So he was making hypotheses about shadow people living in parallel dimensions. That is one hop, skip, and a jump away from talking about life on higher dimensional realities or an afterlife. And that was Stephen Hawking, I think, the most respected physicist. So whatever this guy is saying, does he compare to Professor Stephen Hawking? I really don't think so. But let's find out who he is, and let's see what the rest of this nonsense is. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. So I don't have my glasses on. Dr. Carroll. Oh, which Carroll could this be? So they didn't introduce who the scientist is, but if it's don't tell me it's Sean Carroll. Something tells me it's Sean Carroll. So if it is Sean Carroll, look, the guy makes a career out of being a skeptic, like the old school skeptic who just denies anything spiritual is real and just reinforces this hyper materialistic atheist religion. A lot of these guys came out of the 80s and 90s. Sean Carroll is basically going off of their tradition. I wouldn't take seriously anything Sean Carroll says. He is a career skeptic, right? Dr. Carroll states the laws of physics underlying everyday life are completely understood. Ha 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 ha. Oh my God. So right away, anyone with an IQ greater than, dying plankton at the bottom of the sea is going to laugh at the idea that the laws of physics underlying everyday life are completely understood and everything happens within the realms of possibility. Okay. The laws of physics underlying everyday life are more or less understood. In science, it's very weird to say something is completely understood. It's a very arrogant statement because all the time there's new discoveries and revisions happening. So this is essentially how science operates, not this weird scientism religion that people like Carroll are proposing. Real science, there's a lot of wiggle room. Even things that are fundamental are not going to be declared as completely understood. For example, we absolutely do not completely understand gravity. Gravity is a very complicated subject that involves basically multidimensional space and the effects of incredible densities and how that interacts with space and time. It's very complicated. I'm not a physicist, and don't listen to my opinions about that subject. But the point is that gravity is also one of the most fundamental things we experience, and it is, not completely understood. So right away, I would call this into question. We have kind of intellectual manipulation already happening on this article. Let's keep going. He says for there to be an afterlife, consciousness would need to be something that is entirely separated from our physical body, which it is not. Well, again, consciousness is the great mystery. It's considered the hard problem of science. Apparently, Dr. Carroll has figured out the hard problem of science by sitting in an armchair and saying, it's all in the brain. Never mind unbelievable groundbreaking research in topics like, for example, ESP, which have proven that it's not that simple. Consciousness can be outside the brain doing stuff that's not attached to the body. You'll never see Carroll mentioning that because Carroll is a propagandist. He's a new atheist, materialist propagandist because somewhere, somehow, people have a stake in the materialist religion to keep it going. Maybe it's a financial stake, maybe it's a cultural stake, maybe it's a matter of controlling the population. I don't know what it is, but people have a stake in it. People like Carroll get paid a lot of money, usually by academia, to keep these narratives going, despite an incredible amount of evidence in contrast to it. Again, incredible amounts of ESP evidence. I don't know, grab a book like Real Magic by Dean Radin. I mean, there's incredible evidence. And then, of course, with the afterlife information, there's just yet more groundbreaking stuff happening right now out of the University of Arizona with Professor Gary Schwartz. Double-blind, triple-blind experimentation in spirit communication, communicating with entities who are invisible, in other words. Stuff that, it's really clutching at straws to say these topics are even fringe anymore. That's not fringe. It really is just there, just that it's not accepted completely, but it's not fringe. So, again, Carroll is on a very shaky footing here, repeating his usual kind of propaganda. Okay, rather, consciousness at the very basic level is a series of atoms and electrons which essentially give us our mind. But what does that even mean? Consciousness at the very basic level is a series of atoms and electrons. Well, this is called reductionism, and it's a failed philosophy. Okay, you can reduce something into its most basic components, but that doesn't limit the value or what that thing is. And also, reductionism fails in a philosophical sense because you can go below atoms into quantum levels, into quarks and things like that, and then even further into areas we don't understand at all. So he's only reducing consciousness down to the level of atoms and electrons. And even by doing that, we're going into a territory of things being all things being reduced to something like 99.999% pure energy, which is what all matter is on that quantum level. So you could say consciousness is atoms and electrons, and everything else is atoms and electrons, everything else is energy, everything else is consciousness. Oh my God, I've just blown the lid off of this argument. The laws of the universe do not allow these particles to operate after a physical demise, according to Dr. Carroll. Why? He said, claims that some form of consciousness persists after our bodies die and decay into their constituent atoms face one huge insuperable obstacle. The laws of physics underlying everyday life are completely understood. What? Here we go. Again, that has got to be one of the most arrogant things I've read all year. And there's no way within those laws to allow for the information stored in our brains to persist after we die, and never mind the incredible amount of evidence of ESP, never mind the ongoing experiments, ongoing research that proves on a statistical level that would, that we're talking about billions to one of it being anything other than the mind operating outside of the brain. So we know that happens. And so that calls into question all of these outdated materialist beliefs. The laws of physics underlying everyday life are completely understood, and there's no way within those laws to allow the information. What laws? What laws are you talking about? So let's say, for example, so you have, in his words, atoms and electrons. This is a very simplistic argument he's putting out there. Consciousness is atoms and electrons. Okay, So why is there no law that allows atoms and electrons that represent consciousness to exist outside of a brain? Why? Why can't atoms and electrons that represent consciousness be put someplace else? Why can't they naturally leave the brain, or find a different system to inhabit and operate those atoms and electrons? Does energy get destroyed? You actually can't. So again, this is propaganda, and it's has no connection to even these fundamental things about physics and science. Which, by the way, I'm not a physicist, and so I don't claim to be, but just on a cursory layman level, it's clear that energy, for example, can't be destroyed. And if consciousness is energy, which he's saying it is, because atoms and electrons are constituents of energy, then right away we know that consciousness can't be destroyed. So we're just on a philosophical level, on a metaphysical philosophical level, we are shredding this idea apart. For his evidence, Dr. Carroll points to the quantum field theory. Oh, okay. In simple terms, the QFT is a belief there is one field for each type of particle. Okay, yeah. For example, all the photons in the universe are on one level, and all the electrons too have their own field, and for every other type of particle too. Okay. Dr. Carroll explains if life continued in some capacity after death, tests on the quantum field would have revealed, quote, spirit particles and, quote, spirit forces. What about dark matter? We don't really know what the heck dark matter is, and that's one of the most powerful forces in the universe. It appears to be parallel dimensions interacting with our own. And this could easily be a location of where, for example, consciousness might be able to transfer into. Dr. Carroll writes in the Scientific American, if it's really nothing but atoms and the known forces, there is clearly no way for the soul to survive death. I just think he's just a really confused guy. Believing in life after death, to put it mildly, requires physics beyond the standard model. So what? So why? So do you want to make the standard model of physics into a religion? Nothing can go past that point. In the 1920s, there was a famous quote by some famous scientist. You have to Google it because obviously I'm reading this article for the first time, so I didn't do any homework. But there was one of these famous scientists who got things wrong, and there was this quote in the 1900s. It was something like, "We've already learned everything there is to know about physics, and from here on out, it's just polishing the details." And this was before the discovery of any kind of quantum theory. This was before nuclear fusion. This was before a lot of stuff. That was a quote from like 1920. So we're expected to believe that, okay, 100 years later, now that quote applies, and now we can definitively say that, oh, we understand everything there is to know about the universe because of the standard model. And that is now our religion. We have to hold everything up to that and then dismiss anything that doesn't fit the standard model of physics. And the level of arrogance, basically, this is why UFOs are not visiting us. This is why aliens are not landing. Well, they're visiting us. This is why they won't land and interact with us, because you have knuckleheads like this guy being the gatekeepers of technology, science, and progress. We're in big trouble. Most importantly, we need some way for that new physics to interact with the atoms that we do have. Within QFT, within the quantum field theory, there can't be a new collection of, quote, spirit particles and, quote, spirit forces that interact with our regular atoms, because we would have detected them in existing experiments. Again, dark matter, but also many theoretical models of parallel dimensions, which sort of postulate if something is on a whole different frequency, you're never going to be able to use a tool, a machine from this frequency to pick up, for example, a parallel dimension on a different frequency, unless that tool is designed in such a way to detect that frequency, which I believe is possible to do, but we're not there yet. I don't think we are anyway. And I know that there's been some funky experiments dating back to yesteryear, for example, ether, or the idea that there is something that there's like diffracting effect with photons that exists naturally, that may be some other dimension, other world that is interfering with the way that light transmits. And I'm obviously doing a lot of injustice to all of that, which was later debunked but then it kind of came back again. There was a guy, I don't know if he's still around because it was like 20 years ago, but there was a book called Alternative Science. I think the author was Richard Milton, and that book took a look again at ether theories and discovered that there was still a lot of scientific validity behind it. So that was interesting. But I don't know, how accurate that is. But the point is that, using our material tools to look for a, quote, spirit molecule, well, first of all, you're assuming that that side primarily uses molecules. But okay, if it does, and we're looking into using our standard model of physics to find the quote evidence of these other dimensions and where and how they exist, well, so if we have to consider that those other dimensions, they might be right on top of us, but we might not be able to access it. And I know that's really frustrating for scientists because you want to be able to manipulate and observe all of these different things. But if it is on a different frequency of existence, then how do you directly access it? So what you do have is mountains of evidence of how that frequency seems to interact with us. On its most basic level, you have ghost phenomena. You have cabinets and things opening, closing by themselves. You have all kinds of really interesting, highly recorded, verifiable phenomena on the quote supernatural level about some force that's outside of this realm interacting with this realm. Now, we can then go much further into the actual objective afterlife data, which we talk about in this channel, which is out-of-body experiences. Look, when I have an out-of-body experience, I'm laying in my bed, and a different version of me comes up out of the body that's laying on the bed, and I can see my body laying on the bed, and I have a second hand, a second pair of limbs, and it's just as physical, and I can make a fist. And then I end up going to a different environment and interacting with real people who give me objective, verifiable data, which I can then bring back and then, for example, look up on Google and verify the experience was real or what I was told was real. When I've been able to do that, right away, it just debunks all this stuff for me. So yeah, I can't put that experience into a laboratory and be able to test it and do double-blind experiments on it, but it is for me, the proof that this kind of skeptical nonsense is just a bunch of rubbish. All right, let's keep going. So now express.co.uk, now they have what looks like a little slideshow of different ghost photos, which I guess I'm kind of glad they did that, because I think a lot of these ghost photos are ridiculous, but at least it's kind of gently reminding people that, hey, people experience these weird anomalies from other worlds all the time, everywhere. So just keep that in mind while you're reading this garbage from Dr. Carroll. Once this is accepted by all scientists, Dr. Carroll says, then they can truly begin to understand how the human mind operates. So this has been the materialist promise for decades, which is that once we get to this level of science, finally we will have the answers about how the mind operates and what consciousness is. And this will never be understood because consciousness is far beyond material constituent parts. So that's why they can never get the answer, and they never will get the answer, but so long as they're looking at it this way. And these people, these materialists, they are like worshippers of material constituent parts. That's their philosophy, and they have a deep philosophy of kind of like meaninglessness. They actually want everything to be meaningless and just based on matter, because that's kind of like, maybe I'm about to be a bit disparaging here, but that's what's in their hearts. They don't have any personal interest in anything of a higher or greater caliber or greater possibility. What's in their hearts is a meaningless black void, and so they have to program their reality around it and stretch that philosophy as much as they can around everything. So the idea that consciousness is operating beyond just material constituent parts, they really, really hate that, because they have a big black empty void where their heart and soul is supposed to be, and that doesn't really jive with that, does it? He said, There's no reason to be agnostic about ideas that are dramatically incompatible with everything we know about modern science. What do you mean? Are you trying to dictate to me how I can think? Because this is how these people are. They're intellectual tyrants. And they're trying to say, well, you have no reason to be on the fence about this. You have no reason to be neutral or even consider alternate possibilities because I am the authority and I have to tell you how to think and what to believe. People got to just reject this stuff. Once we get over any reluctance to face reality on this issue, we can get down to the much more interesting questions of how human beings and consciousness really works. Now you have this fake kind of virtue signaling, where it's like, well, once we get over this issue of billions of people having paranormal experiences and near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences and contact with their deceased loved ones and having trips and going to other worlds and having things verified and having supernatural encounters and spirit encounters, and once we can just get past all that stuff, then finally we're liberated from all those terrible superstitions, and then we can finally understand how consciousness really works by discovering that it's all just meaningless material parts. So that's it for this garbage dump article, which is just giving it's the definition of retrogressive, and you know, it's I'm going to actually turn my internet back on because there's another article here by Express UK. Because even right here, look, let's see, are ghosts real? Scientists, is this going to be another debunking article or is this something else? Let's see, on Express, are ghosts real? Scientists claim to have just discovered the truth. So here we have another clickbait Express article. And let's see if this one doesn't like walk back everything else we just read about, you know? Okay, so we have another debunking article. Ghosts are a trick of the mind when the brain is still half asleep, according to leading experts. So, you know, so you can just keep cooking these things up and playing into people's anxieties and using controversial issues like this to basically get clicks. Now, at the end of the day, there's enormous progress in the field of life, you know, life beyond the grave and spirit communication, but because a lot of people are not using their critical minds and they're not looking at all sides of a story, an article like this one can do enormous damage. It can really set things back, and it's a shame because I see how, you know, how people can just be, you know, very badly psychologically affected when they have beautiful experiences, spiritual experiences, but because they're programmed to believe in what authorities say and to react to clickbait headlines like this, you know, they have to then question themselves, and all their hopes are crushed, and there's just this incredible darkness that can come over people when they are exposed to articles like this, after, you know, especially after they have finally accepted certain experiences that they've had and they finally understand these things, and then because people are susceptible to these types of things, you know, then they can have all that come crashing down, and that's a real shame. And that's why articles like this are so irresponsible. And this Carroll guy, you almost got to feel bad about the guy, because it's not a very pleasant philosophy, and you know, it has to be able to be the closed-minded skeptic. You have to be constantly on the defense against mountains of data, mountains of experiences, and somehow maintain your footing. That's why, again, it's like a religion, it's like a cult, but it's like, you know, it's weird. It's like a death cult, really, because like a death cult, I mean, the idea is that everybody who dies is gone forever, and that's what they want, it's what they believe in, and it's what they fight for. So it's a very peculiar thing. So what is this coming up? Afterlife. Expert discusses feelings in near-death experiences. What is that? So we have another yet more wonderful content from express.co.uk. I don't know what this is about. Who's talking? I'll have to watch this later. But again, look, the same tabloid that puts this stuff out, they also put out all the time pro NDE stuff. So sometimes I've been on board with this website or this tabloid because it's like, yes, mainstream attention on near-death experiences. And then, then they release this kind of garbage. So they're always going up and down, again, to play with people's emotions. That's it for this video. If you like this, then, let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are about this article, how to deal with this kind of materialist propaganda. And anything else. And you get involved with afterlifetopics.com. Join the Facebook group Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. Grab a book like Understanding Life After Death so you can have the objective evidence of these subjects laid out clearly in a book. I also recommend, of course, Victor Zamet's book, A Lawyer Presents the Case for the Afterlife. Again, laying the evidence out to debunk this kind of stuff. And it's always good to spread that information out. If you see people spreading this article, then counter it with the objective evidence, which is available online. You can use that. It's free. Especially victorzamet.com is one of the better places to get educated on the subject. And it is a small kind of information war that is happening still. Thanks for watching this video. I'll catch you guys on the next one.